All right, so without further ado, so let's have our first ever discussion for the last quarter no, of this school year. Okay, so last time I have given you an activity, no, the Venn diagram between the two words, the history and her story. Okay, I hope that you did it already. Okay, so later on, we will find out bakit natin ginawa yung activity na yun, no? For what purpose. Now, so introduction to world literature. Okay, so what comes to your mind upon hearing the word world literature? Ano agad di pumapasok sa isip natin kapag naririnig natin yung salitang world literature? In anyone? Ano yung pumapasok sa isip natin kapag naririnig natin yung salitang world literature? Pag mahiya, sumagot, ba? Tatapos ang taon. What comes to your mind first upon hearing the word world literature? Ano yung pumapasok sa isip niyo? Anyone? How about your Kim? What comes to your mind upon hearing the word world literature?
Sir,
Yes,
poetry and novels.
poetry and novels. Okay, so literature pa rin kasi siya, no? So poetry and novels of what? Philippine poetry ba? Philippine novels ba? When we say literature, world literature. According to Kim, it's a different literature sa mundo. Okay, so syempre, no, in Tagalog, okay, so the different literatures around the world are internationally or made by, tawag dito, by authors no, from the outside the country. Okay, so introduction to, that is the world literature. Okay, so now, world literature has been defined no, by Damrosch. According to David Damrosch, okay, he answers the question, what is world literature sa kanyang article entitled Academic Journal, World Literature Today in 2003. Okay, and he writes about the three possible features of world literature. And these are as follows. So according to David Damrosch, ang features of world literature are classic, masterpiece, and windows to the world. Okay? So paano niya nasabing classic? So the classics daw is a work of transcendent, even foundational value, often identified particularly with Greek and Roman literature. Okay, so a world of literature can be classic. No, it needs the test of time. Okay, so masasabi siyang classic because it needs the test of time para siya masabing classic. Bakit naman masterpiece? Okay, so one features of world literature naman is the word masterpiece. Okay, masterpiece naman according to David Damrosch, okay, masterpiece can be a recent or even contemporary work and need not have any foundational cultural force. Okay, for a world literature to be say a masterpiece, it must be engaged in a great conversation. Okay, so that's how literature can be called as masterpiece. It can be engaged in a great conversation. And lastly, features of the world literature is windows to the world. Okay, it becomes windows to the world wherein it serves as literature now reflect the country's cultures, traditions, and way of living. So meaning, the windows to the world, no features of world literature, it expose the country's culture through literature. Okay, na-expose yung kultura, traditions of a certain country, not through literature. Okay, so that is windows to the world. Okay, so those three are features of world literature, again, according to David Damrosch. Okay, so classic, masterpiece, and windows to the world. Now we will go to literature and history. Okay, so way back, this is a two different notion. Okay, literature tsaka history. Na magkaiba sila ng discipline. So although, way back to with time natin ngayon, na literature and history sa two different disciplines or two different subject areas. Okay? So, ganun naman, although today's world no, insists that history and literature are separate disciplines, no, in the ancient world, they were once considered as two parts of a whole. Okay? So, a way to interpret the world in two different ways. Okay, so in the following lessons that we are going to discuss for the entire quarter, we will see what 21st century writers have to say about world history, no, and how they help in being part of conversation no, that stems from the past and continues into the future. Okay, so sabi nga, di ba, as the Filipino proverb says, ang hindi lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. Cliche it may seem, but it literally means, di ba, in English, one who looks not back at whence he came will never arrive to whence he is going. Okay, so I believe that this saying applies to time as well as space, no, and that it resumes a literary conversation with history is important to get a grasp in today's world. Okay, so we cannot understand the literatures of the modern one of the 21st century if we are not going to look on the past. Okay, syempre yung mga literatures natin ngayon, hinango pa rin yan no, from the past. Okay, so yung mga literatures natin. So kaya mas okay or it is essential or vital for you to look in the past. Okay, so that is literature and history. So under literature and history is history and her story. Okay, di ba last time I have given you the activity of differentiating history to her story. Okay, so I know that some of you do a research out of it. Okay, history and her story. So first, bago natin i-discuss, what have you find out or what have you observed during your activity between history and her story? Dun sa mga ginawa ninyo? Ano yung mga nabasa ninyo or na-research ninyo between the two words, history and her story? Can somebody tell me? How about you, Bayawa? What have you researched no, about history and her story? Na kahit yung short, ano lang, concise definition lang. Anyone? History and her story, anong pinagkaiba nila? Di ba you have your activity last time between the two, history versus her story? Anong
Sir,
pinagkaiba? Yes.
yung sa history daw, ano daw, pag-aaral daw nun sa past lives, tapos sa mga literature. Tapos dun sa her story, parang perspective nung woman. Ganun.
Okay, so very well. Okay, so history and her story. So according to Kim, history is tawag ito, pag-aaral daw from the past. Okay, and her story naman is pag-aaral through a woman's perspective. Okay, so that is exactly the correct answer. Okay, but there are some kasi or there are somewhere in the past, no, wherein history no, was defined based on its pronoun his. No, sabi daw nahati yun into two words such as his story. Okay, wherein dominant daw kasi no, yung male perspective with history. Kaya nagkaroon tayo ngayon ng her story wherein female naman no, yung perspective. Pero it does not follow. Okay, so yung history, hindi yun ang galing sa word na his story. Okay, so history, the word history, it comes from the ancient Greek word utopia or historia. Okay, Historia, historia. Okay, it means knowledge obtained by inquiry. Okay, and it is etymologically unrelated to the possessive pronoun his. Okay, so hindi siya related dun sa pronoun na his sa his story. Okay, kasi yun yung naging batayan ng her story na tinatawag. No, her story has nothing to do with the word history. Okay, so define muna natin yung her story. Her story kasi is a term no, from history written from a feminist perspective. Okay, so feminist kaya siya her, no, her story, which emphasizes the role of women or told from a woman's point of view. Okay, saan siya nag-originate yung her story? It was originated as an alteration of the word history, okay, which in their opinions no, is traditionally written as his story or from the male point of view, which is not. Okay? So yung history natin, it comes from the Greek word historia. Okay? So wala siyang kinalaman or it is not related etymologically na sa possessive pronoun na his. Okay? So hindi from a male perspective. But with that opinion, we come up now with a her story. Okay? So kung saan it is history or written from a feminist perspective naman. Okay? Kasi nga pinapaniwalaan nila noon na yung history is from the male point of view. So syempre hindi papatalo yung babae. Gumawa sila ng her story. Okay? Kung saan naman it was written from a feminist perspective. Okay, but then again, okay, her story has nothing to do with the word history because etymologically, history is not related, no, to the possessive pronoun his. Okay, so hindi his story yun, no? Historia talaga yung from a Greek, coming from a Greek word, no, historia. Okay, utopia. So one best example, tawag dito, before we go to one best example of her story, no, which in story more on feminist perspective. Okay, so I would like you to reminisce first, no, the story or the epic, the Odyssey and the Iliad by Homer. Okay, so are you familiar with the epic, the Odyssey, tsaka yung the Iliad by Homer? Natatandaan pa ba to?
Di
Hindi niyo pa ba nabasa ang The Iliad tsaka ang The Odyssey way back on your junior high school days? You know about Troy, the Trojan War. Alam mo yung Troy, the Trojan War? Uy, alam ba yung Troy, yung the Trojan War? Do you
Oo,
have any
no, sir.
idea of it? So, napanood lang. Di ba, sinong ano doon? Sinong mga characters? Sabi niyo, napanood niyo. So, who are the characters present no, in the movie Troy? Yung tanda. Sino yun? Hindi yung artista mismo ha, yung pangalan ng character. Number one, ano si Brad Pitt, the Achilles. Diba? Ano sina Achilles, si Helen of Troy. Okay? So
Heck,
yung mga hari, si King Priam, ando pa si Patroclus, si Hector the Great. Okay? So kung natatandaan ninyo, no? So yun yung the Iliad and the Odyssey ni Homer. Okay? So has something to do with the movie Troy, the Trojan War. So yun. No, two epics yun. Okay? So after the war and during the war. Okay? So ang sumulat nun ay si Homer. Si Homer is a blind poet. Okay, so siya yung nagsulat or he wrote the two epic as a foundational poems in Greek literature. Okay, so epic poem yun, yung dalawa, the Odyssey and the Iliad. Magkaiba yun ha, yung the Odyssey at the Iliad. Okay, so some sort of review lang, yung the Iliad at saka yung the Odyssey. So yung the epic poem, Iliad, no, it relates a series of episodes 9 years into the Trojan War, no, that include the stubbornness of Achilles, no, the death of Patroclus, tsaka yung Achilles' revenge kay Hector. Pagdating naman kay Odyssey, it tells the story of Odysseus, okay, and his adventures after the Trojan War, as well as the trials of his wife, which is Penelope, and his son Telemachus. Okay, so si Odysseus dito is one soldier, no, during that time. So balikan natin, I have here short video, no, of the summary of the two, the Iliad at the Odyssey. No, para tawag dito ma-refresh sa inyo before we go no, to the female perspective naman, no, on Penelope's perspective about the Odyssey. Okay, so kailangan muna ma-refresh sa inyo yung kwento about the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. Okay, so kindly watch this no, for a while. By the way, do you have a classmate who say Gabriel S. Ortega? Who is that person? Do you have? Or modular to online ba siya? Ortega na gumagamit ng account. Wala. If none, hindi ko siya
no, sir.
a-admit. Kasi hindi ko natatandaan Way Ortega, no? So I will not admit him or her. Kung sino man siya, no? Okay, so kindly watch this video first.
In the introduction, the reader is illuminated to the ongoing epic that is the Trojan War, which has been raging already for 10 years. Apollo inflicts a plague on the Achaean army after Agamemnon keeps one of his priest's daughters as a prize. And this dates back to the origins of the war itself, in which Paris, Prince of Troy, took Helen from King Menelaus. The Greek army, the Achaeans, are closing in on Troy, whose warriors, the Trojans, refuse to back down and are determined to drive off their invaders. During the rising action, Agamemnon takes Briseis from Achilles, the mightiest of all Achaean warriors. Zeus agrees to punish the Achaeans for Achilles, who is refusing to fight because of his pride and honor. They've been besmirched. Mortals and gods fight and are wounded in battle. Gods even take sides, sometimes switching back and forth. Gods cannot die, but when they are wounded, they often return to Zeus. But countless mortals do die in these battles, which are brutal and arduous. Zeus forbids the other gods to interfere in the war. With Zeus's help, Hector, son of King Priam and brother of Paris, breaks through to the Achaean ships, hoping to burn them. Patroclus, Achilles' closest friend, tries to persuade his comrade to fight. Instead, Achilles, unable to get over his injured pride, gives Patroclus his armor and tells him to lead the Achaeans into battle himself. Hector kills Patroclus and then takes the armor Achilles had given his fallen friend and wears it around. Sometimes switching back and of King Priam and brother of Paris, breaks through to the Achaean ships, hoping to burn them. Patroclus, Achilles' closest friend, tries to persuade his comrade to fight. Instead, Achilles, unable to get over his injured pride, gives Patroclus his armor and tells him to lead the Achaeans into battle himself. Hector kills Patroclus and then takes the armor Achilles had given his fallen friend and wears it around as a sign of disrespect. Achilles, learning his beloved friend has been killed, joins the battle at last, and the gods even return to fighting. During the climax of the Iliad, Achilles chases and then kills Hector in single combat. In doing so, he resigns himself to a fate of glory in exchange for life itself. He will soon die, having avenged his friend. During the falling action, Achilles' rage is hardly sated. He essentially holds Hector's body hostage, and Priam, Hector's father, begs Achilles for his son's body so he can give it a proper burial. His humility strikes a chord with Achilles, and he returns Hector's body to his father. During the Iliad's resolution, Hector is buried in Troy. The characters in life and death can now achieve the honor of closure, not just of battle, but through the important ritual of burial.
Okay, so that's a summary, no, of the Iliad, no, by Homer. Kung saan it opens in medias res. Okay, when it's in medias res, okay, di ba, it started in the midst of the story. Okay, nag-start siya sa gitna, okay, ng story because that war, the Trojan War, has already been going on for over 9 years. Okay, so and the Greeks are not doing too well, no, at that point. So they have been hit by a plague, and Agamemnon discovers that the Greeks' capture of two Trojan women, which is Chryseis and Briseis, lies behind the illness. Okay, so now Agamemnon holds Chryseis and decides he will give her back, but then he wants Achilles to give him Briseis instead. Okay, so Achilles is so offended that he decides to sit out the rest of the war. So things continue to go rather badly para sa mga Greeks. Achilles still stubbornly refuses not to participate, but he decided no, to send his friend Patroclus, no, kaibigan ni Achilles yon, to fight in his place. So even giving him Achilles' own armor. Okay, so kanina yung napatay ni Hector. Diba? Binigay ni Achilles yung kanyang armor, no, to Patroclus. So the Trojan Hector kills Patroclus and takes the armor. Okay, so this enrages Achilles, no, and draw him back into the fight. He kills now, no, Achilles kills every Trojan in sight and eventually slays Hector as well. So napatay niya rin yung si Hector. So Achilles, however, is not satisfied with Hector's death. So he attaches the Trojan's body to his chariot and drags it around the city for 9 days. Paikot-ikot, no, hatak-hatak na yung katawan ni Hector. So the poem there ends with a God-negotiated truce, and Achilles returns Hector's body to his father, King Priam. Okay, so yun yung naging summary no, ng plot summary ng epic poem na Iliad. Napunta naman tayo kay The Odyssey, no, by Homer pa din, no, ni Odysseus. Okay, kung natatandaan si Penelope, okay, so nandito si Penelope, yung nymph na si Calypso, nandito rin siya, si Telemachus, okay, yung kanilang anak. Okay, so para lang ma-refresh. Okay, so kindly watch this short video naman or summary of the Odyssey.
Welcome to a world of mythology and history, a crazy epic fueled by the imagination from which we can learn so much. I'm Russell Jaffe for Course Hero. Come with me on a journey we call the Odyssey. Even though the Odyssey has withstood the test of time in a pretty unbelievable way, very little is actually known about its author, Homer. We do know that it was written approximately 2,700 years ago and is a sequel to the Iliad. Some scholars suggest that Homer may have been blind. Some think that Homer was actually a bunch of people. And one scholar even suggests that maybe Homer was a woman in keeping with the oral storytelling tradition. What we do know is that the Odyssey is a true epic in every sense, filled with literary devices like similes, metaphors, and mythology to tell a story broken into 24 books. Key themes in this book include hubris, that's pride or arrogance, worst case scenario stupidity, that really drives the action, temptation, that develops the characters, hospitality, homecoming, it's the journey, deception, fate, where the will of the gods meets the ability of the characters, justice, and vengeance. Sweet, sweet vengeance. So much vengeance. Now, breaking down such a massive, epic text into a summary is pretty challenging. But the most important thing might be to remember that there's sort of three main sections of the book. The first section is all about what's happening in Ithaca, the home of Odysseus, our main character, and his family. The second part is all about what happened that led Odysseus to where he is now, trapped on an island and still trying to get home after 20 years of being gone. The third section is all about Odysseus's journey home to seek revenge, reclaim his throne, and reunite with his family at long last. So the book begins with the god of gods, Zeus, and his favorite child, Athena, discussing Odysseus's predicament and thinking about whether or not they're going to help him. Now, Zeus, he's pretty upset with Odysseus, and so is the god Poseidon, who rules the sea. But Athena takes pity on Odysseus and really wants to help him out, and especially his family. We see what's going on with his family all throughout this section. It's in Ithaca, and his son, Telemachus, is 20 years old, and he hasn't seen his dad since he was a baby. Penelope, Odysseus' wife, has been basically in mourning for about 4 years with these suitors mooching off her and her son, living in their palace, eating all their goat, drinking their wine, and generally causing mayhem. Penelope has been in denial that Odysseus is not coming back. She holds out hope that he'll return. Penelope has locked herself away and has been knitting a death shroud for Odysseus' aging father, Laertes. And she keeps undoing this shroud so that she doesn't have to make a decision about which suitor she's going to pick. The suitors are expecting her to pick one of them, marry them, and move on. Telemachus, with a little help from Athena, in disguise, which is a recurrent theme, the gods love disguises and they love deception, helps Telemachus create a plan to find his father and bring him home. Now, in the next part of the book, Odysseus tells us all about what's gotten him to this island, Aegea, where he's held captive by Calypso, a nymph, which is a lesser god, who really digs him. We hear all about his exploits in the Trojan War and then his long 10 years journey home. Now, the main theme here is probably hubris, because even though he's incredibly strong, he's incredibly brave, and he is a natural leader, his showboating and in some cases braggadocio, that is really letting those insults fly and the mocking fly, have gotten him into these predicaments in the first place, particularly involving the Cyclops, the giant one-eyed monster that ends up trapping Odysseus and his men. When Odysseus blinds him and he and his men escape from the Cyclops' cave, Odysseus lets loose a taunt saying, "If anyone asks who blinded you, say it was Odysseus of Ithaca." Well, all the Cyclops has to do is put in a prayer to his father, Poseidon, ruler of the seas, and the next thing you know, Odysseus is stranded on this island, and he's not getting off. In part 3, Odysseus is finally able to, with a little help from the gods, escape this island and begin his journey home to seek vengeance and take back his family, his home, and his throne. Now, Odysseus began his journey with 600 men, but now he is the only one left. But this was also telegraphed to him by the gods. And this is where we really see that theme of fate coming up a lot. The things that are beyond the character's controls, the gods favoring them, helping them out, but they're not just in cruise control. The gods need you, mortals like Odysseus, even though he's really sort of above average, to get involved and to make things happen. So even though things have been foretold to Odysseus, and even though he knows and his family knows that the gods are taking favor on him, he still has to work hard, be virtuous, and not fall victim to the same fate that so many others have fallen victim to, which, frankly, is death. Odysseus finally makes it home, and in disguise, meeting up with Athena, also in disguise, he reunites with his family, who don't know it's him, returns back to his palace, impresses his family with a series of tests proving that it's him after all, takes out all the suitors, and then finally reunites with his aging father, Laertes. This book really ends with a few major themes: the relationships between fathers and sons, fate itself, and the role of mortality when it comes to the gods or being favored or being looked at in a positive light, and things beyond your control. And of course, homecoming and what it means to come home a virtuous person. Now, you may know the general plot, but the journey is so much bigger than the destination. Come with me, and I will guide you through all the sea monster encountering, the lotus eating, the land of the dead, and disguise.
Alright, so that's the summary, no, of the Odyssey by Homer. Okay, but it's not stated there. No, hindi na state dun yung mga journey kung saan kinalaban ni Odyssey o ni Odysseus or Odysseus, no, yung mga monsters. Okay, so the Lotus feet, yung iba't ibang monsters na nakasagupa niya as he go along, no, on his journey way back home to Ithaca. Okay, so yun yung summary ng ating Odyssey na by Homer as well as the Iliad. Okay, now I would like you to ponder, no, on this excerpt, no, by Margaret Atwood. Okay, so it is entitled A Low Art. Okay, A Low Art is an excerpt, no, by Margaret Atwood, wherein It is the retelling of the Odyssey, no, from Penelope's perspective, which gives us a different take on the epic and reveals gender stereotypes found in Homer's The Odyssey. Okay, just like what I've said, this is an example of her story. So wherein it is from Penelope's perspective, not from a female perspective of repelling the Odyssey. Okay, so yung story, the entire story, this is a short story lang naman, an excerpt lang siya. Meron siya dito sa PowerPoint presentation. Okay, or you can go to your Genia account, okay, and then look for the excerpt. Okay, so I'll show you. Okay, this one. So this is the lesson package na 21st Century Lit Intro to World Lit Second Quarter. Okay, lesson package na yon, nandito na lahat yung PowerPoint presentations, even the PDF no, of the story, A Low Art or an excerpt no, entitled A Low Art by Margaret Atwood. So this is Penelope's perspective or point of view no, regarding the life of Odysseus. Okay, so you are going to read this, no ponder on this excerpt, then kindly answer the following guided question no, at the end. So upon reading the story, answer the guide questions below. So 5 questions lang to. So these 5 questions is available on your Genia account. Kindly look for 21st Century Lit Intro to World Literature second quarter. Kindly hit the take quiz button, no password needed. Okay, so 1 to 5 lang yon. So that will serve as your assignment na lang. You do not have enough time na to do the activity. Okay? So pero if meron pang matitira, pwede yun ang simulan. Okay, pero kung hindi kayang matapos din, it will serve as your assignment na. Okay, before answering the comprehension question, again, make sure to read the entire excerpt of A Low Art no, by Margaret. Okay, so this is Penelope's perspective about Odysseus. Okay, so is that clear? So siguro assignment na lang yan. No? We do have 2 minutes remaining time na lang. Okay, so kindly hit the thumbs up button yeah, if that's clear. Do you have any questions regarding the literature and history of introduction to world literature? If none, kindly hit the heart button. Okay, so before we part ways, before I dismiss the class again, reminders for those students know who has any complete requirements for the following activities, quizzes, as well as exams. Now kindly comply. Now I will be waiting up until Thursday this week. Okay, that would be the last chance. No, hanggang Thursday lang. Okay, because next week will be card showing na, no? April 17. Okay, and then don't forget your assignment, no, your activity. No, okay, so the essay, the 5 question essay about the excerpt Allow Art. Okay, so I hope that you have learned something new for today. I think let's call it a day. Goodbye and God bless. Stay safe, everyone.